the basic direction of travel that we should be taxing wealth and property more, and relying less on tax from the highest earners, I think that's pretty generally accepted. And, I think one of the unfortunate things about the last couple of years is that there was no real attempt at proper tax reform in that direction under Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves. And I very much hope that under whoever is chancellor and whoever is their economic advisor, that we do have some actually proper tax reform that aims at smoothing out some of the really inefficiencies and complexities of the existing system, at the same time as increasing the amount that we get from taxes on wealth and property.
So one of the most senior economic advisors in the background to Andy Burnham has urged him to abandon his previously enthusiastic support for wealth taxes should he become Prime Minister. Burnham is rumoured to be considering an increase in capital gains tax, bringing it in line with income tax. But Lord O'Neill of Gatley, who's expected to join him in Downing Street, says wealth taxes tend to raise little revenue and are often easily bypassed. Joining us to discuss it is Jonathan Portes, Professor of Economics at King's College London and former Chief Economist at the Cabinet Office. In principle, do you think that wealth taxes can be sort of introduced in a way that doesn't have unintended consequences and actually ends up raising less money, losing more money than they raise?
Yes is the short answer, and I'm pretty sure that Jim O'Neill actually agrees with that, frankly. I think there is a pretty broad consensus among economists on what you might call the sort of progressive side of the spectrum that, first of all, the UK already taxes income, and people on high incomes in particular, at rates which are at about the maximum that you can get. In other words, there's not a lot to be gained by jacking up the top rates of income tax. That would be counterproductive. There's also a consensus that we do not tax wealth and property either efficiently or fairly, particularly since the amount of wealth there is in the country has gone up quite a lot faster than the amount of income. And that's bad socially, it's bad economically. Over the medium to long term, it's bad for the intergenerational equity. So the question is, how do you tax wealth more efficiently, more fairly, and more heavily? And I think there I tend to agree with Jim that actually a wealth tax as such is probably not going to raise, it could be done, but not going to raise a huge amount of money and causes all sorts of problems. Equally, simply putting up the rate of capital gains tax without making some changes to it isn't the answer either. But the basic direction of travel that we should be taxing wealth and property more and relying less on tax from the highest earners, I think that's pretty generally accepted. And, I think one of the unfortunate things about the last couple of years is that there was no real attempt at proper tax reform in that direction under Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves. And I very much hope that under whoever is chancellor and whoever is their economic advisor, that we do have some actually proper tax reform that aims at smoothing out some of the really inefficiencies and complexities of the existing system, at the same time as increasing the amount that we get from taxes on wealth and property.
Some of this stuff is immensely complicated, but I remember looking into a proposal that Rachel Reeves was very interested in on wealth tax. Apparently she rejected it in the end, but it was essentially in a complicated way, in a formulaic way, you basically had to guess the wealth of somebody. This is a different proposal, isn't it? Because capital gains is charged on wealth that is realised, so it's actually real money. That's more practical, is it not? Why is it so hard to implement that?
That is more practical, and I think and I think we should remember. I started my career at the Treasury in 1987, working for Nigel Lawson as Chancellor, and Nigel Lawson actually did do the proposal that's on the table now, which is to tax capital gains at the same rate as income, with an important modification, which is that there was an inflation adjustment, so that you were only taxed on the amount that you gained over and above the inflationary gain. And I think that was actually a very sensible system. And in my view, that's where we should be looking to go back in that direction, towards Nigel Lawson, which of course quite bizarrely will be described by I'm sure by the Times and the Telegraph as some sort of Miliband-esque reversion to socialism or something. Of course, as I say, it's complete nonsense. That's what Nigel Lawson did. There are issues, and in particular there are issues with what happens to people who leave the country, what happens for long-term capital gains when it takes a very long time for people to realize those gains, and of course the taxation of property, which is another big area in this, because frankly one of the biggest problems in the UK system is the hugely regressive, inefficient and outdated council tax system, which undertaxes high value properties, especially those like mine in London and the South East.
Very good of you to put that on the table, Jonathan. Thank you very much. Jonathan Portes, Professor of Economics at King's College London and former Chief Economist at the Cabinet Office. And the fascinating thing, I think, if you believe some people, then Andy Burnham is going to be a sort of red Andy with, commie kind of advisors and Ed Miliband ruling the roost. But you look at some of the others and they have a background in investment banking. Some people would say that they look more like Tories, that their views are actually, much more pro-market. He can't face in both directions.
Isn't it extraordinary, though, if we just take a step back, that actually the man who we are very much expecting in 3 weeks' time will be the Prime Minister, we don't know what he thinks about these issues.
Yeah. And it's a free-for-all, and just like everybody, is sort of saying whatever they want in government at the moment, all these people who are supposedly offering him advice are telling us what they're whispering in his ear. They whisper in his ear and then go and blab it to the media. It's an extraordinary state of play.
And that policy agenda will have to be sharpened up and clarified and then made clear to the public over the next few weeks.